Before we start to look ahead and see who might be out there waiting to be a Cleveland Brown this upcoming offseason, we do have a slight scheduling change here. Our live show has been moved from Thursday to Wednesday just for this week due to the Browns playing on Saturday. So if you've never joined a live show before, I guarantee you're going to have a good time. So join us tomorrow, Wednesday, 4 o'clock Eastern. Welcome into the Cleveland Browns Report by Chat Sports. I am your host, Matthew Peterson, and on today's show, we're going to look at the offseason, because when you get eliminated from the playoffs, that is when the offseason starts, right? Andrew Berry last year said they started looking at Deshaun Watson back in December. Well, you know what? It's December right now, so you better believe he is looking ahead for next season. So we're going to go through some off-season targets for the Cleveland Browns. Now, I do want to hit on a quick piece of injury news, though, that just came across the wire, and that is, unfortunately, that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah has been placed on injured reserve, and that's going to do it for him this season. That's a big bummer, no doubt about it. I do want to remind you guys, though, we are officially in the season of, there's only 4 or 5 games left, and you're eliminated from playoff contention. Yeah, you're probably going to get shut down for the rest of the year. It's a foot injury. I think if the Browns were still alive, it might not be the same result, but when you're one of the best players on defense and you're eliminated from the playoffs, there's really no logical sense in pushing it so he can play a meaningless Week 17 or 18 game. But let's get into some off-season targets now. I want to break this down by going through the Browns' biggest needs. And that first one, in my opinion, is defensive tackle. This was the Achilles heel of this team this season, right? It ultimately, I would say, was the biggest blame as to what went wrong. Because there was a good stretch of the season when cat was out of the bag, the Browns can't stop the run, and every team took advantage of it. And even when the offense with Jakobi Brissett was averaging 24, 25, 26 points per game, the defense was getting gashed in the run over the middle. So let's start by looking at some free agents. Now, this is a pretty good free agency pool coming up for defensive tackles. Same cannot be said for every position group. Now, the big name right there is Daron Payne, right? He's been trade rumored for a while. He's going to be a free agent. I expect Andrew Berry to at least pick up the phone and see what the asking price is. Now, I'm going to look at one name specifically in just a moment. I do want to show you, though, their Pro Football Focus ranks for the defensive tackle, interior defensive line position. Javon Hargrave, who is the oldest of the bunch, 29, is having a phenomenal year. It's not really like Andrew Berry to go after. Again, we don't have a huge sample size. We only got a couple off seasons to look at, but I'd be a bit surprised if he wants to ink a near 30-year-old defensive tackle to a 3-year contract. But one guy that I do like, one guy that kind of jumps out to me, is the guy from the Music City team, right? Teair Tart from the Tennessee Titans. I've watched a lot of Titans football, and I think this guy would be a fantastic addition to the Cleveland Browns. 21 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. I get it. Those aren't eye-popping numbers. But the Browns don't need someone with eye-popping numbers. They need someone who can do their job, right? Sit in the middle of the defensive line, eat up some offensive tackles and guards and centers so that the linebackers can do their job. And that's what Tart can do very well. So I would very much like it if he was in brown and orange next year. All right, next need for the Cleveland Browns is wide receiver. This isn't a glaring need, but I think it's been somewhat evident that they're very thin at receiver. And when Amari Cooper went down with a hip injury and was limited against the Bengals, it was obvious that Cleveland struggled to move the ball elsewhere. Now, looking ahead here, I've got some roster locks for the Cleveland Browns, okay? And that is Amari Cooper. I just don't see a way he's not on the roster next year. Donovan Peoples-Jones and David Bell. Those 3 guys, no matter what, are on the roster next year. Bubble candidates like Anthony Schwartz and Michael Woods, I don't think they're cemented in there. I think Woods is probably in, but I don't think you can say definitively for sure one way or another. Now, before we look at some wide receivers in free agency or maybe even trade, I do have to share with you guys some information about today's sponsor, which is Fetch. So today's Browns Report is brought to you by Fetch. Fetch is a super easy to use app and completely free. It lets you earn rewards on literally anything you buy. Scan any physical receipt or e-receipt, and you will earn points for your purchases. And the process only takes seconds. You don't have to worry about where the receipt is from or what's on it. So, let me show you how simple it is. All you do is open up the Fetch app, press the orange camera button, and snap a photo of your receipt. Then hit submit, and you'll see the confetti pop showing you that you've earned more reward points. It's a simple process. You can also click the e-receipt function to get rewarded for your Amazon purchases or even super chats, believe it or not. Shout out Soul Train. Or other online shopping by syncing your email account. You can then redeem those points for gift cards at Amazon, Starbucks, or any of the other hundreds of retailers, restaurants available on their app. Fetch is available on iPhone and Android. Now use our link, chatsports.com/fetch. Plus, when you enter promo code CHAT at sign up, you're going to get 5,000 bonus points when you scan your first receipt. That's the equivalent of a free $5 gift card just when you get started. It's a completely free to use app, and the 5,000 bonus points, they're only available for a limited time. So get started now. Chatsports.com/fetch. Promo code CHAT. All that information is in the comments and the description of today's show. Now let's get back to some wide receiver targets for the Browns. Free agency-wise, it actually isn't that great of a pool. Remember how fun it was last year? Like, we were talking about guys like Godwin. That's not really the case this year. JuJu is probably the best, and I really think he sucks. So I'm not really in love with any of these free agent wide receivers. If I had to pick one, I think Mecole Hardman could be an interesting name to watch for. He fits the mold of what the Browns are looking for, which is a guy who can push it over the top, a true speed demon receiver who can stretch the field. Because the last thing you want to see happen is your wide receiver room kind of turns into, like, say, the Chargers, where they've got no speed. Mike Williams is not a fast dude. Keenan Allen's getting old. And defenses know, we're not really worried about you beating us deep. We're going to keep it in front of us. And that's going to make life miserable for the quarterback. Now, I did see this on Twitter. Chops was talking about it. I thought he had a good point, too, so I wanted to share it with you guys here. So, Ian Wharton tweeting out, it makes sense, referring to the Arizona Cardinals, by the way, this is a bit of a thread. It makes sense to trade Marquise Brown on his fifth-year option. Get $13.4 million in cap and an asset. That or trade 31-year-old D-Hop post-June 1st. Okay, so that's the part that kind of jumped out to me. DeAndre Hopkins on the market, potentially? Well, I'm interested. Now, Hopkins, we know, if he's not a top 5 receiver in the NFL, he's number 6. Like, he has been that good. The last 2 seasons, a suspension this year and injuries last year don't necessarily show the best stats, but let's not kid ourselves. DeAndre Hopkins is absolutely one of the best receivers in the game here. The Browns don't have a glaring need for a true wide receiver 1. They've got that in Amari Cooper. They have an up-and-coming wide receiver in Donovan Peoples-Jones. But tell me, for a third-round pick, you wouldn't be a bit interested. Now, I'm not really sure what Hopkins is going to go for. Cooper went for a 5th. Hopkins is better than Cooper in my eyes, so probably going to go for maybe a closer to a 4th. But maybe the Cardinals are able to swindle a 3rd and go, hey, just because the Cowboys got burned last year, we're not going to get burned. Now, it's also weird because Chase Claypool went for a 2nd, but the age and the contract, which I'm not going to dive into Hopkins' contract because we'll save that if we ever get close to that point, but that's also a big factor. Now, would you do this D-Hop trade? Would you part ways with a 3rd-round pick for DeAndre Hopkins? Let me know in the comments. T for trade or P for pass. I think you have to for sure consider it. And for a 3rd, I'm probably going to hit that T for trade button. Let me know what you're thinking down below in the comments section. All right, let's move on here. Some other needs for the Browns. Defensive end, in my opinion. Jadeveon Clowney only signed a 1-year contract. Really doubt he returns, especially because it's been a mediocre-ish season. That's kind of putting it at best. Haven't seen enough from Alex Wright to know definitively. Yeah, that's going to be a starter next year. Isaiah Thomas at times has played better than him. Now, what about this? What about Draymond Jones? Big fan of Draymond Jones from the Denver Broncos. He's quietly been a very productive player for them the last couple of years. I mean, it's a Broncos team that, wanted to put Bradley Chubb and Von Miller together. They both had injuries. Chubb got traded. Von Miller got traded. Who's been the only consistent thing there the whole time? Draymond Jones. 6.5 sacks in 2020, 5.5 sacks a year ago, and this year he's already tied his single-season record at 6.5 sacks. So Draymond Jones, if the Broncos do not bring him back, I think would be an awesome partner on the opposite side of Myles Garrett. Now we move on to linebacker. Unfortunately, we learned today, Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah going on IR, and man, I mean, in order, Anthony Walker, Jacob Phillips, Takitaki, and JOK. 4 linebackers, all on IR. That is a big-time bummer. Now, if I had to make a projection of which linebackers are going to be on this team's roster next year that are currently on the roster right now, I'm going to go with these 4 right here. JOK, Fields, and Phillips are still under contract, so unless they get cut or traded, they're going to be on the roster. Takitaki is going to be a free agent. Now, you might think, why would they re-sign him? He's coming off an injury. Doesn't really seem like the best time. I agree. I might push and say that injury for at least the Browns, this sounds kind of sad, but might be a blessing in disguise, right? Maybe other teams kind of take Takitaki off their radar and allows the Browns to swoop in and maybe get him for a little bit less than what he would have gotten, which is a bummer because he was going to get a decent payday this offseason. Now, the other big name that's not on the list right now is Anthony Walker. I really have no idea what to make of this situation. 2 years with the Browns, 2 years of injuries involved in a season. He's a bit older. I don't see him coming back if I had a gun to my head. I just don't see Andrew Berry going, yeah, let's re-sign that aging linebacker that for 2 years with us missed time. Just doesn't feel like that's the best resume. But if he does have one thing to show for it is, hey, that defense really went down the shitter when I went down. So maybe that's a good point Walker and his agent can make of bring me back. All right, 5th and final need for the Browns this offseason. I'm going to go safety. I'm guessing John Johnson is done in Cleveland. The Browns can save a good amount of money if they move on from him after this year. And they got some bills coming up. Deshaun Watson's not making $1 million in 2023. You got that. You got Denzel Ward. You got Myles Garrett. You got Amari Cooper. You got some bills to pay. And John Johnson, that's a nice piece of savings. Now, before I give you what I think the Browns might do at the safety position, I want you all to sound off for me in the comments. What do you think the Browns' biggest need is? I'm expecting an overwhelming votes of defensive tackle. If you want to go outside the box, by all means, do so. I'm just going to challenge you to give me I think it's wide receiver, not defensive tackle because blank, or linebacker, whatever it is. So let me know down below what you think the Browns' biggest need is. Now, getting back to safety, my projection, I'm thinking Grant Delpit. He's really turned it around the second half of the season. DeAnthony Bell, probably in line for, hey, first season, kind of get your legs underneath you, learn what it's like to be in the NFL, maybe a bigger workload in year 2. Probably going to go cheap in free agency. It's really dependent if they spend top dollar for Daron Payne. Well, then they're not going to go out and get Jesse Bates, for example. And then probably a draft pick. It's probably going to be some combination of Delpit and then whatever cream rises to the top of DeAnthony Bell, some mid-level free agent signing, and a draft pick. That's probably going to be the safety room for next season. All right, that's going to do it for us on today's show. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. I'll see you all tomorrow, Wednesday, 4 o'clock Eastern, live show, just this 1 week right here on the channel.